Hello and welcome everyone to this Hillbreak webinar. We're really pleased to see so many people registering, signing up and attending for this event. There'll be more about how you can access the materials from the session later on today. But I just wanted to give you a brief word about Hillbreak for those of you who don't know us. Hillbreak was set up about 10 years ago, almost exactly 10 years ago, by John Lovell and myself. And our purpose as we set out was to assist and challenge organisations to achieve stretching sustainability targets and objectives. We help them therefore to establish appropriate policies, but importantly to see through important actions in order for those policies to become real. We do that through advisory work and coaching and training work, and we engage with very senior people within organisations, SLTs, and senior sustainability professionals. And it's because of that engagement that we've had and what we see in the world around us, what we read and hear in the media, for example, that we're aware of increasing concern around sustainability progress and also around the professionals themselves and their well-being. So those are the things we're going to dig into today, a bit more about the survey and its background in a moment, and then we'll dig into some of the real content. But before we do that, I'd just like to welcome our panelists to this event. So I'm Miles Keeping. I'm now going to ask each of the other panelists to tell us a little bit about themselves, very briefly, who they are, where they work, and how they've got to this point in their careers. I'm going to start, Ed, with you, if you'd introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Vaughn Dixon and I'm an independent consultant. I'm currently contracting with Permira, who are one of the top private equity firms. I have spent maybe 23 years in my career working in real estate. I started out trained as a carpenter after I left school and then worked my way up through consultancy into FTSE 100 listed real estate, and then moved into real assets investing, and finally have made the jump into private equity. So there's been a few war stories that I've collected on the way, and looking forward to sharing some insights.
Fantastic, that's great. Thank you very much. Abby, if you'd like to introduce yourself to
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Abigail Dean and I'm Head of Strategic Insights at Nuveen Real Assets. So in my role, I oversee the research and sustainability teams across real estate, natural capital and infrastructure. Our real estate business is the 5th largest real estate asset management business globally, so have a very full role in that area. I've been at Nuveen just coming up to 10 years now. I started off in the sustainability role, and in the last few years that's broadened as we've brought our research and sustainability teams together, and also incorporated prop tech into that as well. Prior to that, I worked in sustainability at JLL for 10 years, so almost as long as Ed in the real estate area, but just coming up to 20 years now.
Fantastic. Seems like only yesterday.
Indeed it does, yeah.
And by no means least but last, Sophie, could you just give us a bit of background about you as well?
Of course. Hello everyone, I'm Sophie Carruth. I'm the Principal for Client Learning at Hillbreak. I have been with the Hillbreak team for the last 4 years, running both open courses and bespoke training courses for our clients, and that's both training sustainability people on real estate and also real estate people on sustainability. So it kind of goes both ways. And prior to that, I spent 16 years at LaSalle Investment Management. I started off as an asset manager and I finished off as the head of sustainability for the European part of the business. So really very much focused on that crossroads between real estate and sustainability. Okay, so before we get stuck in, I just want to spend a moment inviting everybody to really get engaged with this session. So we're going to have the Q&A open on Zoom. Please do submit your questions. We've got a number of questions that have been submitted prior to the session as well. We've got a couple of members of the Hillbreak team also supporting us in today's webinar. We've got Pionica in the room, you won't see her, but she'll be doing some bits in the background. We've also got Timia helping to run the Q&A, and we'll be dropping some important, useful bits of information into the chats that you'll be able to see as well, although you're not able to use the chat in this session. And just because I know it will be the first question everybody has got, the findings from the survey that we're going to be talking through today, those will be shared with everybody after the session. think we can get
Absolutely.
started.
So let's just talk a little bit about, before we dig into some of the detail, just a bit about the survey itself. So we undertook a survey, and we'll be sharing some of those results with you during the day and afterwards, as Sophie has said. We were having conversations increasingly with our clients, and particularly sustainability professionals amongst client organisations and other peers in the sector. And over the last certainly few months, probably a year, we've been aware of the increasing conversation around concern about people's well-being, about issues, for example, around feeling burnt out, around issues like wondering whether their people are achieving the objectives that they set out to achieve. These are the sorts of things we're going to dig into. We thought it'd be a great idea to ask people more formally through a survey. So we undertook a survey which was open for a few weeks. It closed down. We had over 70 respondents to that. What was really interesting about that is the nature of the survey respondents, which we're going to come to in just a moment. But we've got essentially two themes which are evident from the survey findings themselves. The first one that we're going to think of a little bit about is the state of ESG, or do we mean sustainability in that respect? And that's something which we may come out in conversation. But we don't want to dwell too much on that, because there are plenty of opportunities for people to have those conversations and to listen to other people speaking about them. What we're really going to focus on in larger part today then is thinking about the sustainability professional themselves and their state of well-being or otherwise. So in that regard, what we're going to do now is just, Sophie's going to share a quick slide to help us understand who was responding to this and what they did.
So let's have a quick look then at who our respondents were. We had, as Miles said, 74 respondents. We had people predominantly working in a sustainability role, and also the vast majority of which were based in the UK. Their roles were covered, spread broadly across investment managers, asset managers. We had some consultants, advisors and agents, and investors and owners. And really interestingly, I think in terms of kind of seniority, we actually had predominantly people in roles as a principal or head of sustainability, or even C-suite roles. So quite notable, I think, the level of seniority of the respondents, and also most people, over half, coming from a sustainability origin. In terms of how they're spending their time, we have here just a little bit of additional insight into the nature of the roles of our respondents. So about a third spending their time doing consulting and advising. That might be internal advising and consulting as well as those delivering that kind of advice to clients. We've got a big chunk of time, 37%, being spent on reporting and disclosure. I don't think that's going to be surprising to anybody. And then strategy development and oversight coming in at 23%. So just starting to get a little bit of a flavour of who the respondents are, what the picture is. We're starting to kind of fill in a little bit this image of where we have received this information from.
So we're seeing a good number of respondents here, so we can hopefully take some of the findings that we've received at face value. Let's just think a bit about what some of these survey findings are in terms of the perception of ESG performance. So here we've got information on the slide which tells us a number of things in terms of how these professionals perceive different aspects of ESG or sustainability to be performing. I'm going to stop right there on that, and I'm going to ask ask Ed if we can think about this term ESG and sustainability. It's something which over the years we've talked about what we do in different terms. We're seeing quite a lot in the media and elsewhere around some pushback on some things. What's your take on terminology as far as ESG and sustainability is concerned?
Yeah, I guess a lot's changed with this over the last few months, right? And where ESG always came from was the UN encouraging companies to understand financially material factors about the way that they invested. And it was always supposed to be about long-term financial stability. I think over time, because it got adopted, it almost became synonymous with sustainability, and we would talk about ESG and sustainability as two sides of the same coin. But actually over the last few months, we've really seen a little bit of a backlash against the term. And that's just because it's become a little bit of a kind of buzzword in finance for sustainable funds, for people doing well by doing good and these sorts of themes. And so I think ESG is and always will be important, but I also think it's something that maybe we leave where it was always supposed to be, which is it's a part of your process, right? It's something that you do. When you're analysing, you're looking for financially material risk factors, right. You do it in your due diligence, and we leave it there. So I prefer sustainability, but a bit of a personal preference.
Yeah, no, that chimes well with me, and so therefore that's what we'll use today largely. Although I do find myself slipping between different terms, and I'm sure we all do. But we're talking about sustainability, about the professionals who are delivering sustainability on behalf of different organisations. Abby, when I look at this slide, it talks about issues around pricing of assets, and we see here a lot of people wondering about whether assets are appropriately priced. What's your take on that?
I mean, I do think that we've actually made quite considerable progress on this in the last few years. I think when I look at where we are now compared to, say, 5 years ago, I think it's undeniably the fact that sustainability factors are being incorporated into the pricing of assets, particularly office assets, maybe not so much in some of the others. I think most owners of buildings would expect that if they did a sustainability upgrade to a building, they would get a return on investment and would feel quite comfortable about that. And that, I would say, would go across the different sectors. I think where we're still struggling a little bit is in two areas. I think there's a frustration with the pace of change on sustainability being factored into valuations. I think that's just the nature of how valuations work. They're backward looking, they're based on comparables, so there is still a little bit of evidence maybe to build on that, particularly outside of the office sector. I do think office is a little bit ahead, and we are seeing that being factored in. I also think we just haven't seen that many transactions in the last couple of years because of the state of the market, and maybe those more sustainability challenged buildings are not being traded because owners are choosing not to sell them because of the concern. Maybe they're choosing to hold on to them and upgrade them, or wait and see what's going on in the market. So I don't feel that we've fully seen the impact of sustainability in pricing, but I don't think that means that it's not a factor. So I understand the frustration, I understand the concern. I'm maybe more of an optimistic person. I look at where we've got to, and so the fact that there's now, I think, confidence that making an energy efficiency upgrade to a building will definitely improve its value, I think we've come a long way in terms of that level of confidence now around that area.
I think that's absolutely right. We've certainly come a long way from the early studies, which were shouting about green premiums of enormous values, and then the next paper would talk about this terrible discount because of all sorts of issues. I just wondered, just on this issue of value and valuation, I appreciate you're not a registered valuer, but you engage with people who are. How well equipped do you think the valuation community is to deal with the sorts of issues that they have to when it comes to regular reporting and other forms of valuation?
I mean, again, I really think that area has come on quite a long way in the last few years. Again, I think that for those working in sustainability roles, they might not be seeing quite the pace of change that they want to, and they might not be seeing it reflecting back. But I do think that the valuation community is really engaging on this issue. I think they're spending a lot of time focusing on working with organisations such as RICS and INREV and ULI as well on their Sea Change programme. So I feel like there has been some real progress. I think that the level of knowledge and understanding is pretty good in that area. And I think that it's now much more common for valuers to they would expect to see information related to EPC, for example, or other factors to get an idea of the sustainability of a building. So I think that it's come on. I do think they're in a slightly challenging position. They have to, as I say, they do have to look at those comparables. There is a limit to the extent to which they can incorporate that information. They're not forecasters. They're not making forward-looking predictions. They're valuing the building as it is now, and therefore we might expect to see more shifts as transaction volumes pick up in the future, and more of that evidence body starts to build.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just going to turn back to the information on the slide, and one of the things that we found there was a sort of equivocal response in terms of the ability of other people to take on sustainability roles. People who aren't necessarily actively trained or educated as sustainability people, might be asset managers, for example, taking that on increasingly. Is that something that you've observed, and do you have any feelings about that?
Definitely. I think over the last year or so, the nature of sustainability roles has just become so much broader. And you kind of ask yourself, was it maybe a little too much to ask of one person in the first place, right? And you start to see now that there's a much bigger role for compliance. There's a much bigger role for non-financial reporting. There's a bigger role for front office staff that are leading individual deals. There's definitely a bigger role for maybe a nominated exec-com member that might be responsible for this kind of thing, but might not have it explicitly within their role. And so that can only be a good thing, right? Perhaps fewer jobs out there for sustainability professionals, or perhaps they're just morphing and becoming something else.
Yeah.
But it's a broad church now, and it's becoming embedded in lots of people's roles. People always used to say we want to ask who's responsible for sustainability, and everyone puts their hand up, right?
Yeah.
And we're actually getting a little bit closer to that, which is really good.
Yeah, and we actually really see that. I think there's evidence in the way the training that we deliver at Hillbreak has really shifted over the last few years. So we started off, Abby, I don't know how many years ago, having that conversation of there's a gap in the market, people need to learn about sustainability, it's got to be tailored to this sector, and through the BBP we came up with that fantastic training programme, which is now, that has come to its conclusion, it's evolved into something else, but what we've seen on the whole is a real shift away from people in non-sustainability roles needing to be upskilled on that subject. And we're spending a lot more time focusing on really role-specific, function-specific training and upskilling, where individuals want to leave with the ability to make decisions confidently about sustainability issues within the various parts of their role where that decision making is needed. So whether that's for asset managers, fund managers, or even more specific for IC members, where you've got an investment committee, do each of those individuals fully understand what their responsibility is, and are they equipped to ask the right questions to make sure that investment decision making is carried out with the full information as it should be.
Well, something I'd like to come back to later on, everyone, is to pick up on this theme of what you might call role creep, mission creep, and the scope of the work that the sustainability professional has to deal with, how that has changed over time, and therefore, alongside that, how this changing of non-experts taking on and assuming more of the burden and the responsibility there, how those two different people might interact. Okay. I'd like to move us on. Do remember, questions coming in would be great. We've got some coming in, I see already, so we'll turn to some of those in just a moment. But if we just have a quick look at some of these perception slide at the moment, we can see a number of things in terms of what has happened over a period of time. So we've got over the last year and a longer term, whether there has been progress on sustainability, and of course how one defines that might well be up for debate. But we've got some figures here in terms of the significance of progress or the adequacy of progress that you can see there, and changes over time. I'm going to come to the panel in a moment and ask them what they think about these numbers. But we've also seen some changes here in terms of the amount of greenwashing and green hushing. I might ask for some definitions around those as well. And then we're going to come back to thinking about the fulfilling nature of people's roles. But it's quite stark and quite interesting to see, as you can tell on the slide there, the change from, say, over a longer period of time down to what has been happening over, say, the last year. So I'm just going to start with you, Abby, if I can, and talk about this degree of optimism, if you like, about the adequacy or the significance of progress on sustainability within our sector. How do you think about that when you see this change and this perhaps an increasing negative view?
I mean, the 5-year figures are very positive, really, and we can see a lot there that people do feel that there's been significant change, which I would 100% agree with. There really has been. We are, when you, and often you do need to do that, look back over a longer period of time to really appreciate how things have changed. So that's good to see that there's general agreement on that in the industry, that there has been significant change. I do think, as we were talking about the previous conversation, that mainstreaming of sustainability, I certainly see an incredible change in the extent to which asset managers, fund managers, and others in related roles really deeply understand these topics, fully expect that that's just part of their day-to-day job, and are really very knowledgeable about it. So I would agree that's been a significant change. Obviously, there's quite a stark difference when we look at the 1 year. I think there's a few things at play there. I think many people will have found this last year to have been a challenging year working in sustainability. I think there's been a lot of press around it, and I think that is probably more around the general investment industry than real estate specifically. And I do think that real estate is slightly different. I think you're investing in a real asset. When you buy it, you're normally buying it for an absolute minimum of 3 years, much more typically 7 to 10. Yeah. Therefore, you do still have to think about what's the standard going to be when we come to sell this building in 10 or so years' time. That's different to working in the liquid market. So I think that press commentary is more around the liquid markets piece. And when you talk to investors and others in the industry, even if they maybe have a healthy skepticism around sustainability, they still agree that actually investing in sustainability improvements in buildings is a sensible thing to do because of that long-term nature of the asset class. So I think that there's that that factor of the the leakage of negativity maybe from outside of real assets. I also think the real estate industry has been through a tough time, right? We've had significant revaluations. And we're hopefully now at the cusp of moving beyond that, and we certainly think the next cycle is starting, so good times should be ahead. In 2026 should hopefully start to see much more significant capital inflows into real estate. So I think that combination of general negativity around sustainability that maybe not so much related to real estate, combined with the tough market conditions that we've had in real estate, have really coalesced here to create this impression for those of us working in sustainability that things are looking very bad. But I just don't think they are. Okay. I think when I look at the underlying data, and we do a lot of work to kind of check the data, we still see growing numbers of corporations setting sustainability targets. That means that's going to flow through to their requirements for their commercial space. We see a very steady level of institutional investors having these kind of commitments and thinking about in their allocation decision making. And we still see development in regulation around sustainability. So for buildings, and yes, there's been some changes. I actually think that quite positive changes on the EU regulations, but EPBD recast, that's a significant step forward. So from my perspective, I look at those as the three key drivers. I think there's a lot of a lot of positivity there, that there is demand for sustainable buildings, and that's going to continue to build into the future. So I think if you take that long-term view, maybe things aren't quite as bleak as people think they are.
Excellent. You heard it here first. Thank you very much for that.
There's a question that's come in which feels quite sort of relevant to what Abby's just said. So this is from Rory, who said, "My take on this moment is that it's the profession growing up. It's an opportunity to get back to basics, less on pledges and labels, more on pragmatic fundamentals, risk management, resilience and long-term value. That comes with challenges for those who've got into the area with strong ideals to change the world. The great thing is in infrastructure in particular is that with good policy, sustainability outcomes and long-term value can be one and the same thing." Thoughts from the panel on
how well put. Yeah. I couldn't agree more, and I think that as well, we don't, obviously everyone who works in sustainability probably is purpose driven, but the vast majority of us, certainly those of us here, we work on delivering investment returns. We have to link the two, and so that point of we've had to, and we've got much more data now. So of course, I would never recommend a sustainability improvement to a building if I didn't have confidence that that it's going to work, that it's going to add value, and that has to be that has to be the guiding star, and that has to be at the forefront. So I think that does mean that sometimes you can't go quite as far as you might want to. That does mean that you have to make decisions and prioritise some buildings and not others. That's the reality that we're in.
That's life, as it were. Yeah. Ed, I don't know why I'm turning to you on this one, but an old lag like me has been and seen many different cycles. And Abby's referred to the fact that things come and go, things change, things come back perhaps in and out of fashion. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, looking at the cyclical nature of the economy and our particular sector and how that's performed, there'll be quite a few professionals, sustainability professionals, who haven't experienced much of those cycles. Just wonder if that's something that you might agree with, and whether you've got any observations on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there will be people out there that are perhaps looking at the news, they're reading about a potential AI bubble, thinking about potential stock market crash and a bit of a correction. I think it's fair to say that we're probably due one. I think, this always reminds me of when I first joined Landsec, formerly Land Securities, in 2015. And that was a business that had seen and played the cycles since the 50s, right? And they got every single one right and made money on the way up. And so you had some really old hands there that when the sort of chips started to turn, they would say, don't worry, folks, we've got this, we've done this before.
Been here
right?
before.
Yeah. And so you can learn a lot from that, right? And I think I learned similar from Aviva investors, from experienced colleagues that have been through the cycles. I think almost on a personal perspective, and connecting with that point about like burnout and people's maybe concern about careers, particularly going into a possible market correction in the month or the year ahead. Like, I think you can really start to prepare for that and almost behave as if it's happening right now, right? So what are the sorts of things that you might do if there was a big correction in the market? Well, you would start to think about looking at your role, looking at your portfolio of projects and activities that you've got planned, your objectives for the year ahead. Are these things that are going to solve problem for your boss, for your executive committee? Are they aligned to the strategy? And are they things which are fundamentally going to help your company to make money in the short or the long term, right? And if you've got anything that's peripheral to those, get rid of them now, right? Because if there is a big correction, that's the first thing that's going to be going out the window. I think also if people are worried about their own roles, and it's no secret that sustainability teams over the last year have downsized, and with a big correction, could that potentially continue? That's absolutely possible. One of the things that really has helped me in career transitions in the past is that transitional network, right? And if people aren't familiar with the term, then like look it up and do a bit of reading. But your transitional network is people that are around a similar kind of level to you, hopefully a little bit more senior in some cases, because that might create some opportunities. Maybe old peers that had the same job as you when you were in a previous role. Perhaps some people that used to be your direct reports in your team, but it's the people that you call when things start to change, right? And so don't wait, pick up the phone to those sorts of people now. Another sort of current trend is just that because it's very much a company's market and not a candidate's market, that means that roles won't go through the search community. So if you know recruiters and you're worried about your own role, by all means reach out to the search community, they will help. And there's some really lovely, fantastic and very efficient people in that world that will help you to find something. But it's much more likely that an opportunity, if you do go through a change in the year ahead, will come from your own network. So the time to pick up the phone is before the crash.
Okay, all right, excellent. This is top tips coming from our panelists already. Is there another question?
Yes, there is, and it's slightly going back to a couple of conversations ago when we were talking about green hushing, which came up on the previous slide, a question that has been upvoted by a number of people, which is really around to what extent are companies doing serious work but communicating less about it, and what risks does that present to investors?
Okay, can we just start off? Who would like to go? Unless I'll nominate a volunteer if not. Who can define green hushing?
I'm happy to
Thank you
take
very
it.
much. You were going to be nominated anyway.
Green hushing is the opposite of greenwashing. Greenwashing, overstating the extent to which your products or services are sustainable. Green hushing is understating that. So it'd be cracking on and doing a lot of sustainability work, but choosing not to share that in a very public way.
Okay, so the question here is that there are organisations doing some serious work in this area, but perhaps they're not being as vocal about it as they might be. Has that happened? Why? If so, why?
I think it has happened, and I think there are both some positive and negative reasons for it. I think on the positive side, ultimately, and it comes back to the last conversation we had around the sort of idealism maybe associated with our area of work and why companies do it. If you're delivering a sustainability program in order to add value to your buildings, your investors should expect that you would be doing everything to add value to your buildings and to deliver investment returns. So you don't necessarily need to overstate or talk about that very much. And also the expectation has probably changed in the last few years. I would expect that most institutional investors would now expect that credible asset managers are just doing this as part of their standard approach, and that's a reasonable expectation. So of course they'll want to check on that in due diligence, but they don't necessarily need to hear a lot about it. So I think that's on the positive side. On the negative side, if organisations are feeling like they actually have to hide what they're doing, that's problematic, because obviously we need to be very clear and transparent with our investors. So I don't know the extent to which that might be happening, but that would be, for me, a problematic. That would be tipping over into not great green hushing.
And there's a bit of a follow-up question, actually, that again has come from the audience, which is what your opinion is on the market signal with such an environment of green hushing. What risks, if any, should we be aware of, and how should we address it as an industry?
Yeah, Ed, I wonder if we can come to you on that. The risks, as Abby was just leading into, around green hushing could be considerable, particularly for investors. Where do you see the risks if this were to become something which was commonplace?
I think with green hushing, so hot topic at the moment is fund naming, right? With the advent of SFDR 2.0, which we understand will become into regulation in 2026. And I think it's probably fair to say between SDR and SFDR and the changes that we've seen on both as they've emerged, we're probably going to emerge into a slightly more simple fund naming environment where it's controlled for people really going overboard in terms of overselling, but it's also controlled for being really specific about if a fund is full of sustainable assets, then there isn't really a reason why you wouldn't, sell that to the client. And so I think that's the industry growing up around that. What I've experienced myself over the last couple of years is that actually we've all become a little bit wrapped up in ESG and sustainability, which latterly I feel came much more about a kind of binary definition of is an asset this or that, is a company this or that, is it sustainable or not? And there were various thresholds and frameworks that people used to describe that. All the while, in financial services, private credit, private equity, real estate, certainly in some areas, investors have been piling money into solutions, businesses, buildings, which are actually delivering some really fundamental good into the economy and changing people's lives. And that's the thing that we haven't been measuring all along. And so I'd almost just kind of flip the question a little bit to say, the risk is that we've forgotten the really positive elements of what we do as investors. And actually that's something in the years ahead that I think needs to come back out after we've all sort of fallen out of love a little bit with some of the kind of green terminology.
That's interesting. Maybe that's something for us as an industry to reconvene on another time. But that's a really good thought. I might come back to you on that one. I'm conscious time's moving on, and we've started already to dig into the effect of people's work on their well-being. But we're now going to focus more particularly on that. So we've got a slide up now, which is about well-being and role satisfaction. The first of two slides on this particular topic. quite a lot of information there. Just going to pick out some of the highlights, as it were. We can see that a lot of you, the vast majority, over 80% of people, have real confidence in their own capabilities. But we also have situations where people feel positive about their work, which is great, over at more than 2/3 there. But then we see some slightly worrying, perhaps, information as well. If you have a look at those two, if you can see the slides in front of you now, the two bubbles at the top, where we've got satisfaction with organisational progress on sustainability, as well as whether or not their targets are likely to be met. We've got some pretty low numbers there, one would have thought. So I'm just going to ask some questions about those, as well as the other things that we've got on this slide around things like the issues around making a difference in particular aspects of work, and also thinking a bit about excited about being about the future. More than half are excited about that. I take that as a win. Just on this, I'm just thinking a bit about the role of the sustainability, and we've all kind of alluded to this already. And Ed, I just want to ask you to begin with. We talked about the sustainability role, and this is something which is, people move into because they perhaps have a mission, for want of a better word, or a particular interest in this. How do you see the role of the sustainability professional? Someone used a phrase the other day about it being potentially a cherished role.
Definitely, I agree. And in a way, I always try and check myself a little bit to remind myself that we have some of the most coveted and rewarding roles in our sector. And so we should always remember that when the chips are down. I think one of the downsides almost of bringing purpose and passion into your role is that is highly correlated with burnout, right?
Yeah.
And everyone that's listening today will have had this probably in the last week or in the last month, where they've had a great breakthrough, right? They've had a fantastic idea, a great conversation with a senior leader, right? You get super excited. And so you work until 10 o'clock at night and you're smashing out the ideas and you're pushing it through and you're setting meetings, right? And then actually the next day, or depending on your particular constitution, maybe the following week, you've got a cold, you're exhausted, right? Maybe you catch some horrible derivative of COVID and then you get depressed, right? And suddenly things start to shift the other way. And suddenly you start to approach burnout and you're exhausted. The key to all of this is consistency and regulation. You have to understand your own body and the way that your energy works. I always say manage your energy and not your time, right? But what does that really mean, right? You can be bombarded with notifications, some good, some bad, as a sustainability professional all day long. You need to compartmentalize your day and make sure that notifications are switched off, that when you're at home, when you're with your kids or when you're in your kids, you're not reading your emails in the bath, right? Put some controls in place and start to make some changes for yourself. And I think that can start to just contain that passion a little bit and use it productively, but not allow it to spill over into burnout.
Yeah. Abby, how do you manage that on a personal level? How do you stop yourself from doing too much?
I think that's good advice from Ed.
Are you reading emails in the bath?
I'm going to stop now. No, I do. I think everyone will have different strategies for dealing with this, and I actually think, and this isn't unique to our area. This is everyone who has stressful jobs. I think that we've got better about talking about this in recent years, and that concept of resilience is much more present for people. So I think you've got to find what works. For me, exercise is really important. I'm not very good at mindfulness, so I've given up on that. But I feel. Did
you purposefully and consciously?
I very consciously gave up on it. Okay. But I do find that I get that from going for a run or going to the gym and also trying to do that socially. So doing that, I find that for me that's really helps that I'm. Doing that, exercising with friends or with colleagues. So that's what works for me. I think the purpose thing is a double-edged sword, and I do completely agree with you, Ed, that yes, it means you can feel things more deeply, but for me, it's so important. It's so important to feel that I'm in a job that I care deeply about, and taking a step back and thinking about the progress we've made over the last 5-10 years and the progress that I genuinely think we're going to make in the future, that does really, and trying to take it away from what might have happened in the last week or the last 6 months, that really helps as well. So I think for me it's those, yes, compartmentalizing, making sure you take the time to do whatever it is for you, whether that's running or mindfulness or whatever, reading, and socializing, and then also thinking about that sort of long-term view to kind of take you out of the challenges of now.
Yeah, and I guess it's something you alluded to earlier on. It's about it's a degree of pragmatism.
Yeah.
What we might hopefully call sort of stretching pragmatism. We're not just accepting, what the business case purely says, but we might try to push that in a particular direction as well. Just on these slides, which we've got some more information here. This is perhaps some of the perhaps more challenging aspects of some of the data that we were shown, and these are some of the bits and bobs which really caused us to feel slightly worried, apart from anything else, about individuals. So we've got information here, for example, about the amount of people who are saying that they are suffering from stress and from burnouts, or they're fighting an uphill battle, as you can see on the screen there. We're talking also here about people who are thinking about having maybe to change their role, looking for new roles over the last 12 months, but also people who have had to take a significant number of people who had to take some time off work due to work-related stress. So we've got this issue going on in an organisation. Let's remember that typically the majority of respondents to this survey were very senior professionals, C-suite or director level people working within organisations of different stripes. So I'm just looking at this information, and one of the things that worries me about this is, apart from the personal stories, which of course are different from at an organisational level, but just thinking organisationally, I just wonder, Abby, to come to you first, do you think, first of all, does this sort of information chime with you? And do you think at an organisational level, not necessarily your own, but you might have information from others to whom you speak, is it something that organisations are aware of and dealing with?
I mean, I as I said, I do think that we've generally got better at recognising these issues. I think HR departments have got better. They've quite common now for there to be sending people on courses where they'll learn about strategies for resilience. Also, you're making therapy or hotlines and things like that available to staff. So I do think we've got better at it. I do think that most organisations care about their staff and want them to be okay. And I think that maybe people aren't always as good at tapping into the resources that are available to them, so aren't aware. So I think that's one practical thing, is to make sure you are aware of what support is available to you. But coming back to some of the conversations we were having at the beginning around real estate's been through a tough time. There's quite a lot of negativity in the press about sustainability and all sorts of other things at the moment. So I'm not surprised that people are feeling this way. It is concerning, and I think the most important thing we can do, as well as being open with your employer and talking to them and trusting that they will want to support you, I think also use your peer network internally and externally, and that's certainly been something that's been really important to me, is to talk to others in similar roles or related roles, and hearing that others are facing some of the same challenges, and what their strategies are. That can be really helpful as well.
There's a really interesting question and observation in the comments from John, who said there's an irony here, isn't there, that sustainability and social impact are seen as the things that can be a huge motivation and positive contributor to well-being for the non-sustainability people within an organisation, and potentially a significant factor in the ability to attract and retain talent. And yet those responsible for leading sustainability are suffering burnout and the negative personal well-being that we've just seen the evidence of a moment ago. So the question here is, what do we take from that? Presumably one thing is to far better understand the extent to which sustainability really is a key factor in attracting and retaining talent, which helps to build the business case for our agenda. So looking at it from a slightly different perspective, from a kind of people management perspective, does that help to build your sustainability budget? Does that help support the business case for ensuring that you've got the right resources on the ground to deliver what's needed internally, not just on the kind of business side of the delivery, but also on the kind of people side of things?
Is that something that fits into when your organisations and others that you've worked in? Is that something that's built into people planning processes?
I think for me, so one of the reasons why sustainability is so stressful is because I once heard stress defined as the perception that you are unable to deal with the tasks that you've been allocated with the resources that you have. So if you self-allocate climate change, right, you are probably always going to feel quite stressed that you're not enabled to deal with that with the resources that you have. And I think for colleagues that are kind of enticed by this when they get attracted to businesses that are sustainable, they will soon, in relatively short order, realise the magnitude of the challenge at hand and inevitably become stressed by it. But I think that's where it just comes down to breaking down the problem into smaller parts and just remembering that our roles here are to interpret complexity, right? The transition to a low carbon economy is happening at different speeds in different parts of the world, but it's pure economics from here. Michael Hillbreak's great resource, if people don't listen to his podcast, Cleaning Up, different people have different views on his politics, but the data and the insights are fantastic. It is changing. The energy transition is happening, and our role is to push it along a little bit further. And so, I think understanding the problem, understanding how it relates to your business, understanding in particular what your clients' needs and demands are, and being able to quite forensically and decisively apply those just in the right places can probably help to take what feels like a really big problem and just take it right down into who's the client, what are we trying to deliver, when's it due, right? And crack on with the problem at hand rather than trying to solve the huge problem.
Okay. All right. So, conscious of time is moving on, I'd just like to ask a bit about your views in terms of looking ahead, and I won't hold you necessarily to any predictions that you might give, although they'd be welcome. Just thinking about the future of the career or the pathway, if you like, of a sustainability professional. I wonder the extent to which you're optimistic about it, about in general, whether there are any specific areas of work and practice, for example, that you might think it would be very interesting for people to help their own careers by developing, and we alluded to some of that activity earlier on. And also, I'd just quite like also your thoughts, and I'll ask very specific questions, so you don't have to remember all of these in a moment, but also your thoughts on how sustainability is likely to be addressed, perhaps 2 to 3 years ahead. So just starting off with looking to the future, Abby, do you see the role of the sustainability professional with rose-tinted glasses, or have you got your sunglasses on?
I mean, I'll restate what I said earlier, that I am naturally quite an optimistic person.
That's why you're here.
Yeah. So yes, I do. I think the role has changed a lot, but that's also part of what I love about it. I feel like my job has been completely different every year for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And I like that, but I get that that's not for everyone. Yeah. I think that how the role is, how I think it's going to change in the future, probably I pick on 2 things. One is we do now have a much better flow of data around the impact that sustainability performance is having on yields, on rental income, etc. So I think that that's going to become more and more, and I think that will grow because I do think we're going to see more transactions next year. So therefore, linking very firmly to that is going to be, it's always been important, but I think we'll have greater opportunity to do that. So I think for those particularly more junior in their career, what I would say is make sure you have a really good grounding of the fundamentals of real estate, you understand how that works and you understand the impact of your area on that.
Yeah.
So, and that's actually, I think, Miles, advice you gave me when I was quite early in my career, and it was, and thank you, it was good advice.
Oh,
So
I was
give
a
that
mere
back.
child at the time.
The other way that I think it's going to change, and that many roles will change, is AI. And I do think that that's going to have a significant impact. Again, I think that could be a really positive impact, because I think AI has the potential to take on some of the bits of our jobs that maybe we don't enjoy quite so much. Maybe it could ease that reporting burden a little bit. Maybe it could move us forward in filling some of those data gaps.
Okay.
So that's get to grips with how AI can play a part in your role.
That's great.
So have I skipped ahead, Miles?
Well, no, you've stolen Ed's question.
Oh, sorry.
He doesn't realise this, but I was just about to ask him about this, because you posted very recently about AI on LinkedIn. I saw that great read, and we are all told, aren't we, in every field within which we work, and particularly in ours, particularly as Abby's saying, the granularity of data is becoming more available, and it's really important that we understand those data carefully. Do you see AI as something which the sustainability professional needs really to embrace, and what are the particular skills or approaches that they could adopt, do you think?
It's a fairly commonly held view, but I definitely subscribe to it, that AI, and particularly ChatGPT 5, which came out in the summer, right? So this is a very new problem, because previous versions and other programs, many others are available that are very good quality, in my view, aren't as good. It's also not really until August, September that a lot of organizations have actually started to integrate that onto their own IT estate, meaning you can work with it freely within your emails and your SharePoint and all the rest of it. And that may have not happened for lots of people listening yet. So this is a relatively new problem. So if for people that are on the webinar today thinking, well, I'm not really across AI and using it every day, that's going to be the majority of people, right? But I would say that I've come across two types of people in sustainability on the question of AI. About 90% of people are in the camp of, oh, well, I've seen some of the outputs and it's not really that accurate. And, I had a friend that used it for this, and, it just gave a little, like, a weird result. And you just hear, like, negative, right? Lots of reasons not to use it. People said that about the fax machine, right? They said that about word processing. I'm just going to use my typewriter, right? Because I know how it works and it's dependable, okay? And so the other 5% of people, and I sort of forced myself over the course of the summer to just like, okay, right, I've got to get across this, have opened ChatGPT or Perplexity, whatever, and they've just sat with it for a week, right, and just started to integrate it like you would with Excel or a word processor or a mobile phone when they first, right, they've started to integrate it into their workflows, and within the space of a week they've realized that it can turbocharge almost everything that they do. 90% of tasks can become 20% faster, 10% of tasks can become like 90% faster. And so if you're not in that camp yet, I would challenge like everyone listening today that's not in that camp to say that you are probably 1 week away from being able to be in that camp and being able to turbocharge your own growth and your own career by doing things faster, which is going to give you an edge, right? Because this is K-shaped. There are people that are accelerating and that are winning with it, and there are people that are just on the outside, not listening, not getting involved. So don't overcomplicate it. It's just something that can make you a bit more efficient.
Okay. I like it. And there was a nice question that came in, which was a hypothetical, I would say. If you happen to have some spare budget that needed to be spent before Christmas and you were going to deploy it on resources, what kind of skills would you be looking for? And I think AI training, or at least a willingness, openness to using AI, certainly is something that's come out of our conversation. And Abby, you mentioned that point about sustainability careers. It's absolutely a career of reinvention and reevaluation, and there's always something new to learn, both in terms of technical knowledge and skills, but also really importantly in terms of the soft skills that are absolutely essential to being able to do any of this work properly. So it's not a full answer to the question, but just a couple of nuggets that have come out of what we talked about.
This is difficult then, isn't it, for professionals to deal with? There's a lot of change going on, there's a lot of rapid change going on, and there's a lot of mission creep going on. And we come back lastly, I think, to this issue then of thinking a bit about support for professionals, where they go. We talked a bit about peer networks and that sort of thing, otherwise. But Sophie, I just wonder if you could just take us through some of the findings from the survey on this.
Yeah, so to close out the survey, we asked a few questions around the kind of support and development needs of the respondents. So around, 2/3 saying that more support is needed. Now, what that support looks like obviously is going to vary by individual. We're aware of some organisations which do provide individuals with a budget on a use it or lose it basis to be used around coaching or other support. Interestingly, private and group coaching satisfaction is very high, so really kind of beneficial where that is in existence. Private and group coaching wanted, that's again nearly 2/3, so it might be that for some people there's a little bit of access, but certainly more is wanted. Rely on peer support to help with challenges is quite high, and relying on peers, that's fine, but I think what we're taking from this is that in many cases a little bit more is needed. I think we had a good conversation a little bit earlier on around what you guys do as individuals. I certainly would add, from a personal point of view, community being absolutely essential, just not feeling isolated in the positions that we're in, reaching out to others, either friends, colleagues, or just networks of professionals with, you know, similar interests is really a key driver. I think that brings us on probably quite nicely to kind of conclude the conversation, to try and tie the threads together. We heard this issue, we've experienced this issue, this challenge around mental health, around burnout, which is what underpinned our decision to launch the survey in the first place. We've also really identified this need for further support, and we'd very much like, the Hillbreak team would like to develop a programme to support those who are looking for further kind of assistance and support in their roles. We'd really love to co-create that with those who'd like to get involved. So our kind of call to action, closing out this session, is if you are interested, if that rings a bell, if you think, yes, I really need to get involved in that, please do let us know. We'll follow up with you. We'd like to set up some one-to-one conversations and some working groups to kind of craft something that's really hitting the spot and really kind of delivering that need that we've identified.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, as Sophie's said, we are closing out now. Time is against us. So I'd just like to thank you all very much for tuning in and watching us and following us today, and some of the great questions which helped us prompt some of our speakers today. I'm very grateful to our panellists, especially our guests, Ed and Abby, who've come today. So thank you very much. It's really, really kind of you. Some real insight there. As well as not just a review of the state of the world, as it were, but some really helpful top tips, I think, for us to think about, as well as for people who've been tuning in. And thank you very much to Sophie, who's been driving a lot of the technology today, and a number of people behind the scenes.
And actually, for some of the lots of questions that have come through that we've not had a chance to answer yet, we will be gathering a lot of those together and responding, following up as we can, particularly those that were around further analysis of the survey findings.
So please do heed Sophie's call. Please be in touch if you'd like more information, if you'd like to co-create with us some kind of space and mechanism for helping professionals to deal with these things. But with that, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you very much. Goodbye.